Everybody to go ahead and mute their microphones. And if you have any questions during today's presentation, you can either chime in and ask a question, or you can throw it out in chat. We'll keep an eye on that. So we'd like to welcome everybody to Provisional Chapter 88, Pittsburgh Right-of-Way Group's November Lunch and Learn. Just to give everybody a little heads up is this month, of course, we're virtual. Next month, we're going to be virtual. We lost some of our speakers, so we've got speakers coming from out of the area. Gary is coming from Chapter 10 in Indiana. So we appreciate him giving his time up and being able to have some speakers from outside of the region come and speak. Just to give everybody a little background on Gary Kent, he's a professional surveyor, and he's in his 37th year with Schneider Geomatics.
Yes.
Okay. And he's out of the Indianapolis area. I've connected with him due to Ryan. Ryan, now being out in Indiana himself, is continually to help support what we're doing here in Pittsburgh and helping getting speakers. Gary has served on the Indiana State Board of Registered and Professional Surveyors since 2004, and is past president of both the American Congress of Surveying and Mapping of Indiana Society of Professional Land Surveyor. That's a hellacious organization title, Gary. And you've been pretty active in Chapter 10 in Indiana as well, correct?
Yeah, I haven't served in any of the officer roles or anything, but I have been active and enjoy getting to meetings and presenting at meetings, which I've done a number of times.
Okay. Well, at this time, I'm going to turn it over to Gary, and he's going to talk about, the roles that professional surveyor has in the right-of-way. A lot of our topics have always been focused on the land agent side of stuff, and we're trying to encompass to show how wide the right-of-way industry is, pun intended. So at this time, I'm going to mute and turn it over to Gary at this point.
Okay, thanks, Johnny. Good morning to everyone. I'm happy to be able to speak to you. It's been an interesting year of this sort of thing. I have done a few in-person programs around Indiana and the surrounding states, but almost everything left on my list, even well into next year, is Zoom or Blue Jeans or GoToMeeting or GoToWebinar or whatever. So we're all getting used to this, I guess, whether we like it or not. So in the next 45 minutes or so, I want to hopefully impart you with some information that I hope and actually expect will help you in your jobs. And that's why we do these sorts of things. And in particular, I want to cover three things. First, just kind of some general information about professional surveyors and what they can do. Secondly, more specifically, the role that the surveyor can play in right-of-way. And then lastly, some tips on communicating with your surveyor and maintaining that close contact that's necessary throughout the program. And before I go any further, I want to emphasize I do like questions and comments. Feel free to just interject. That might work better for me, then I don't have to kind of be paying attention to a chat, which I don't think I even have on. So if you want to interject or send a chat, and Johnny, you could catch that and interrupt me when I take a breath, is perfectly fine. But I really like interaction and questions, especially when I'm talking to non-surveyors. And there may be a couple of surveyors on the call, I'm not sure, but I very much enjoy talking to people who aren't surveyors to try and help them understand the things we do and why we do and what we can do for you. So having said that, I want to, I should also say we're always happy to hear your experiences, and you might have some experience that was either good or bad involving a surveyor. So we'll do like Jeopardy, and frame that as an answer, and then I'll give you the question that goes along with that. Let's talk a little about professional surveyors just to get started. Every state requires that surveyors be licensed. I think actually Wyoming may have been, interestingly, the very first state that requires it. Most states have required it since the 20s, roughly in the 20s, maybe a little after that even. Interestingly enough, surveying kind of, or I should say civil engineering actually kind of came out of the surveying profession. And now people like to, for a variety of reasons, kind of say that surveying is a subset of civil engineering. I routinely take exception to that, at least when it comes to boundaries and legal descriptions. That it has absolutely nothing whatsoever to do with civil engineering. There are elements of surveying when it comes to construction layout and design types of things and topographic surveying that are math and engineering related, but certainly boundaries and legal descriptions have nothing whatsoever to do with civil engineering. According to the state of Pennsylvania, professional licensing protects the health, safety, and the health and safety of the public from fraudulent and unethical practitioners. Every state has some sort of kind of mission statement that's related to why surveyors are licensed, and it normally relates to health, safety, and in some states the welfare of the public. Well, in my opinion, for surveyors, that need for licensing, that public health and safety is rooted in the public's private property rights. And that is directly related to boundary surveying and legal descriptions, which are actually joined at the hip. Now, boundaries are based on legal descriptions. Legal descriptions define boundaries. I have often said that if a surveyor can write a goodly, or someone who is wanting to become licensed at that minimally competent level, if they can write a good legal description, they can probably do a good survey. But there are many, many other aspects of surveying, and I'm actually going to, I don't know if I can I'm not going to be able to show this, but I have a link to the Pennsylvania Society of Professional Surveyors that I'm going to go to so I can read some things here for you, which have to do with the definition of surveying. And I say that licensing, I think, is rooted in boundaries and legal descriptions, but as I said, there are so many other aspects, and it's defined as the practice of that branch of the profession of engineering, which involves the location, relocation, establishment, reestablishment, or retracement of any property line or boundary of any parcel of land, road right-of-way, easement, or alignment. Now we're getting in our realm here, right? The use of principles of land surveying, determination of the position of any monument or reference point which marks a property line boundary, or corner resetting, replacing any monument. And then it goes on and includes a lot of other things. So, surveying is rooted in boundaries, but there are so many other things that we can get involved in that I'm going to talk about as we go along today, mainly because I want you to be aware of the types of things that surveyors could do for you if you're aware of it and have the need. So related to boundaries, only a professional surveyor can perform a boundary survey. In no state in the country is an engineer allowed to do that. I think Delaware was the last state that allowed that. In most states, by statute, only a surveyor can prepare a legal description. Now, I didn't look at Pennsylvania. It's not always patently clear. It is patently clear in Indiana that only surveyors and attorneys can write legal descriptions in Indiana. And I like to joke that the only attorneys that write legal descriptions shouldn't, and the ones that could write them, that probably are competent to write them, usually say that's why we hire surveyors to do that sort of thing. So the other thing I want to point out is that in some states, which includes Pennsylvania and Indiana, interestingly, a surveyor can actually do some level of engineering design, right? So there might be some additional services in that realm that a surveyor could do beyond what you're normally thinking of. Now, that engineering design, it typically has to be under the law kind of incidental to the other work that they're doing, but any surveyor in Pennsylvania should be familiar with that. And in addition to doing boundary surveys and writing legal descriptions, so many other things, including an element of engineering design even. So that's kind of some background there for you. When it comes to the role of the surveyor actually in right-of-way, my number one suggestion is this: train your surveyor so he or she intimately understands your business and what you need in order to successfully accomplish your work. The more your surveyor understands your work, the more effective he or she will be. An example of this is years ago we were doing work for quite a bit of work for a pipeline company, and I was doing some training on the use of GPS, and our company was trying to get in with this company and do some mapping for them, and we made a point of trying to make a sales job to them, and said, when you're putting pipe in the ground, we can locate that to the 10th of an inch. Or I'm sorry, the 10th of a foot, plus or minus about an inch. And, how valuable would that be for your GIS to have that sort of accuracy? And they looked at me and said, well, if we need to repair that, if we need to get that thing uncovered later on, we're going to dig a 20-foot hole. So we really don't care if it's plus or minus an inch. And I thought, oh, yeah, okay, you got me on that one, right? Things that, and surveyors are technical people. We're going to talk about that in a little bit. And so we tend to overthink and probably overcompensate sometimes and trying to oversell precision perhaps more than what someone needs. So the better we understand what it is that you need, the better we're going to be for you. Another example of this is that if the surveyor understands what you're trying to accomplish, then we can make better recommendations on what type of instrument or service might be the best for you on an acquisition. And in fact, we might be able to suggest, you don't even need a survey for what you're trying to do here. So maybe your surveyor can suggest something that is that's going to meet your needs without being that full-blown survey. For example, we have a client that we have several times run into situations where doing what we normally would do on an acquisition. Now, this wasn't for right-of-way, but this would be for like maybe a substation or a pumping station where they were actually going to acquire a fee interest. To do what we normally would have done probably would have cost the client $20,000. But we were able to within the law and legally and pursuant to administrative rules, do something that was a little bit different and probably saved our client $15,000 on that particular project. Again, understanding what's possible, understanding what the client needs. So in right-of-way, surveyors can obviously do what we would call a route survey. We define that in Indiana in our administrative code. That's actually defined as a survey that's executed for purposes of acquiring an interest in the land, in the tracts of land required for the following: highways, railroads, waterways, pipelines, electric lines, and any other linear transportation or utility route. But we actually have administrative code. Not only does it provide that definition, but it also provides guidelines for doing those types of surveys. And there's a very specific reason that we do that in Indiana, and I don't know of any other state that does it, but it works really well for us. And we have used it in other states, even though that type of thing is not specifically spelled out there. It's an applicable process that we can do. But there's so much more, so much more. But again, if the surveyor does not understand your needs, you may end up with less or more than you need, or worse, you may end up with problems in the future. What kind of problems? Well, ambiguous easement boundaries that will end up causing future problems and even litigation. Your infrastructure may be lying outside the bounds of your easement. This is very common. I'll show you an image in a second. What we find, and I think if you all are not aware of this, certainly we as surveyors are aware of it. We are frequently staking a new easement for construction, and we have a joke in our office that the edges of that easement, which has already been acquired, right? The edges of that easement that we stake are just a suggestion to the contractor, right? Well, they're not a suggestion. They actually define the legal limits of the easement, but contractors often just, yeah, well, whatever. So what I want to show you is an example of this. Johnny, can I share a screen? Yeah, I can share a screen, it looks like. Let me see if I can do this. Pages. All right, are you seeing this image up here now?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, here's a situation where the yellow line defines an easement that was about, I forget how wide this was, probably close to 100 feet. You can see the line with the G in it, which indicates the gas line. And right in the center of the drawing, you can see that the gas line was actually 65 feet outside the easement. Now, in this case, it wasn't a crisis. You can see this was on a golf course and they were going to just redefine the easement. But what in the world is that all about? And had this not been a golf course, and when I look at this out in the field, I'm fairly certain I know what happened, but nobody ever followed up and changed anything, changed an easement, did anything. So we have situations like this. Had this been, I'll tell you, had this been a development that someone was in the process of putting a high-end subdivision in, and they had done all their design based on this easement was actually defined. It was not dependent on where the gas line was. It was very specifically defined in a legal description. And if someone had paid to do their complete design out here, and then found out that the gas line is 65 feet over, which means there's going to be major redesign of this whole area out here. Boy, somebody's going to be paying some bucks to fix that. So this one they're lucky, but it could have been way worse there. Another one actually related to this same one here. Now this is a blow up you can't see very well, but this yellow line is in fact the easement line, and you can see it goes pretty much right down the center of the driveway. There's about 12 feet of this house that's built in the easement. Now, I'm pretty sure I know what happened here, but this house has been there probably pushing 30 years, which actually doesn't really matter. But But look at this, all right? So what's going to happen? And I saw a posting from this owner on Nextdoor at one point, and we were doing the work on this thing, and I saw their posting, and they were, commenting about how in the world could this have happened. Now, this isn't a matter of where the house got built in the easement. I mean, that obviously happened, but this is a subdivision, and the subdivision plat, they platted about 25 feet of this easement. How did that happen? I'm pretty sure I know what happened as I look at it, but this is the sort of thing that can go wrong in the in the world of right of way if somebody's not paying attention, and if the surveyor is not doing what they should be doing. So let me get back to my stuff there. What else can happen? What other types of problems? Well, court decisions that actually go against your interest. What's going to happen with that house? I can guarantee that they're not going to make them tear that house down and move it over. That's one thing I can guarantee it's not going to happen. On this same project, the other thing that can happen, we had some very angry adjoiners. Not just the person with the house that's in the easement, but nobody wants that. You all want to be good neighbors, and we just don't want that. And yet that's the sort of thing that can happen. So what specifically can a surveyor do for you? Well, it's a lot. I said that earlier. It's a lot, but only if your surveyor is trained in your business. So he or she understands at a very high level what you need in any given situation. You need to tell them that you expect them to advise you. You want them to be your consultant. Right? You don't want them to just do what you say because there may be something better that can be done. So when do you need that surveyor? What type of survey do you need? Well, you probably know when you clearly need a surveyor, at least in the traditional sense, what you're used to doing. But your surveyor likely knows when he or she can help in ways that perhaps you're not thinking about. So the types of things that the surveys in right-of-way, certainly boundary surveys, this would typically be where there is maybe an acquisition, not just an easement, but an actual acquisition. We can make exhibits, we can write legal descriptions, obviously. This would be substations, pumping stations. We can conduct route surveys, obviously, that's a lot of what we do. A surveyor who understands your interest and what you're trying to accomplish could actually assist in route and site selection. We have an employee in our office that when you have one client, and when they are running a new line somewhere, they actually go get in a car, they take him out there, and they drive the entire thing. You drive and walk the entire thing so that they can get his guidance on what makes the most sense with respect to the route, the general route they're trying to accomplish. What might make the most sense in trying to facilitate that happening. Obviously,
Hey,
surveyors can. I'm sorry, was there a question?
I got a question for you.
Yeah.
I've had this, happen in the past, especially with Google Earth being as popular, is that companies will tend to use all Google Earth and not do that field visit. Is that where a lot of these mistakes come from, or is it?
Yeah, I think that most of the problems we run into were, predated Google Earth, but that's certainly, we are going to see problems in the future that resulted from people using Google Earth rather than doing surveys. Now, this is where I think a surveyor can help you. A good surveyor can look at a situation and say, yeah, we can use that for this, but we can't use it in that situation. You have all, well, as surveyors, we hear stuff all the time where we'll hear somebody say, well, I went on to Beacon. Beacon is actually a product of our company, but it's a highly used GIS app that's in all the entire eastern United States and in part of the western U.S. also. And people will say, I went on Beacon and my boundary line is right through my neighbor's garage. And what I was just showing you in that image a few minutes ago, that wouldn't be that uncommon in a GIS to see that line going through the garage. Now, in this case, it actually does go through the garage, but certainly in the huge majority of cases, it doesn't. But when it starts getting close, somebody needs to do the field work rather than rely on GIS. So, I think we haven't been into the collectively, those of us in our professions have not been using GIS long enough to see the ramifications that are going to come along later on, and they absolutely will. So, what else? Well, you stake for construction. We can stake for maintenance. We can use a drone for mapping or for exhibits or for inspections. And we're doing this. Obviously, preparing legal descriptions for acquisitions. Preparing legal descriptions for partial releases. I'm not sure what you all have out your way, but in central Indiana, on the north side of Indianapolis, there are a number of pipelines that angle across the northern suburbs from southwest to northeast. And most of those were originally acquired with blanket easements. And I often joke and say I think it must be against the law to develop property on the north side of Indianapolis that does not have a pipeline going through it. And many of them have these blanket easements, right? And so we have to contact the pipeline company and what width do you need? Well, we need 80 feet. Okay, well, they will mark the pipeline and we will locate that and write a description for them to use and then create the exhibit for them to do partial releases, release the entire 40 acres except for the strip that they need. Exhibits for court, we've done this a number of times. Exhibits for public meetings, and I think here's where a surveyor can help you and a surveyor should be knowledgeable. Those are two different things. Right? An exhibit is not just an exhibit. What are you going to do with that exhibit? Is this to meet with an owner or to use in a public meeting or is this to use in court? Those all are different. And what scale do we need and what colors are going to be most effective, that sort of thing. A surveyor should be able to advise you on local ordinances, state statutes, the normal standard of care, local custom when it comes to doing the things that you all need to get done. We can testify in court. I have done that several dozens of times in my career, and including for utility companies a number of times. We give depositions, and I want to point out that just because a surveyor is a good surveyor does not mean they're going to give good testimony or give a good deposition. We have a surveyor in our office who is an outstanding surveyor. He is hands down very, very good. Does he want to give a deposition or court testimony? No, not. He doesn't want to touch that with a 10-foot pole. In fact, if he sees a project coming along that looks like that, he sends it over to me. A surveyor can meet with you and local officials or separately with local officials if that's something that you want. You can attend public hearings. I'm going to talk about some of these because now we're getting, some of this is in the communication realm that we're going to talk about more in a few minutes here. We can meet with the affected owners, right? I did that on the images that I just showed you. They were doing maintenance out there, clearing, hadn't been cleared in 30 years. And there were people with swing sets and walls and vegetation, gardens. There was all kinds of stuff out in that easement that was all going to get cleaned out. And so I met with the client and with the owners to talk about that. So there's so many things. Can you get the survey that you need? and stay within your budget? Well, maybe, maybe not. But you certainly won't know unless your surveyor knows what it is you need and why you need it. If we have a clear understanding of what your goals are, what you're going to use these documents for, what you're going to use this instrument, I don't mean survey instrument, but more of an instrument of service. What is it that you're doing? What are you going to do with the things that you're wanting us to do? And then we can guide you if we understand your business. And I can't emphasize that enough. If you've got a surveyor that isn't interested in talking to you, which we're going to talk about next, then you need a different surveyor. Right, which leads me into communicating with the surveyor, right? So we all know what a people person is, right? It's that person who likes to deal with people, not things, right? We all know who they are, right? They would go. I travel all the time, and you get in a hotel late. I should say, in the previous world that we lived in. You get into a hotel late, you want to get a little bite to eat, you go down to the bar. There's one person in the bar in addition to the bartender, right? The people person sits down next to that person. They got the whole room and they sit right down next to that person. And in 5 minutes, they know their name, the names of their kids, where they work, what their hobbies are, and what they want to do when they retire. We all know people like that. My girlfriend's like that. We were in one of our favorite bars last winter. There's usually a band there. The band broke for a break. I went to the restroom. I'm gone, so what, like 3 or 4 minutes. And I get back and she introduces me to the 2 women at the table that were sitting next to us. This is Eileen. We're going to meet for dinner next week while you're gone, and then we're going to go shopping. And I'm like, what? You just met this woman like in the last 120 seconds, right? That's a people person. We all know who those people are, right? Some of you, I wouldn't be surprised if a number of you on the call are, but I'll tell you, I often ask when I'm speaking to surveyors, and this is the truth. I'll ask a room of 100 surveyors. I'll say, how many of you would self-identify yourself as one of those people? As one of those people persons. How many of you will self-identify that way? My experience is approximately 7 hands out of 100 will go up, which means roughly 93% of surveyors really would prefer not to be talking to you, right? So it's not that they don't like you, it's just that they would rather deal with technical things, not people. In fact, surveyors, there's a joke, surveyors go out on a project and hope nobody's around, and they also hope to get done and leave before anybody shows up. And there are all kinds of problems that can be caused by this, but that's, my point is that surveyors are not technical people, or they are technical people. They're not people persons. So you need to get to know your surveyor. And you can, and then talk with them in frame the conversations, the communication in technical terms. I know about all this because I am one of them. I am not a people person. I sit down on an airplane and hope nobody talks to me. I sit on the opposite side of the bar. I'm not the person who goes in and sits next to somebody. I sit on the opposite side of the bar. But I've learned to adapt because over the last 15 years, I've had 3 girlfriends or girlfriends who were most assuredly people persons. And so I had to figure it out. And I talk about this all the time. And I speak like this all the time, all over the country. I've spoken in all 50 states, 3 times in Europe. And people say, how can you say you're not a people person? Right? I'll say, because for me, what we're doing right now is a technical exercise. It's not a social event. If it was a social event, if I was there and you're having a meeting, I'm going to get my drink and go stand over in the corner and hope nobody comes over and talks to me. unless it's technical stuff, then I'll be glad to talk technical stuff, right? Even though I can do this, I've learned how to do this, but it's a matter of adapting, and I've done that. But my point is, if you are a people person, you're going to get frustrated with your surveyor. You know, they want to leave voicemails instead of talking. Right? They want to deal with email. So you have to be patient and understand who they are, get to know who they are. Like me,
Sure,
right?
as a land agent, I have found that you know, to find that to have a surveyor let me know where they're going to be is like pulling teeth. But in the same respect, if there's not somebody to interact with the landowner, stakeholder, then the surveyor is going to be, you know, held up because now they have to have that conversation,
Right.
instead of having, you know, an agent out there to act as a medium and to let the surveyor continue to do their work.
Yeah. No, that's a really good point. And you know, this all rolls downhill too. If you have a surveyor who is you know, highly technical, and you want them to testify in court, right? I do these mock trials. In fact, we did one in Chapter 10 several years ago. I wrote a mock trial, and we had two attorneys, and we had a judge, and we had, you know, plaintiffs and defendants and surveyors. And I did one of these one time, actually in Philadelphia. No, it was in Pittsburgh, actually, for the Pennsylvania Society of Land Surveyors. And after we finished the thing, which is a full day thing, and the group divides up into juries, separate juries, and they have a jury ballot, and they deliberate, and we all come back together. And at the end, I always ask the judge, you know, you got any comments for this? And in this particular case, she said, yeah, I have a suggestion and a comment I want you surveyors to think about. She said, you got to understand why you are here. You know, why are you testifying? As an expert, you're testifying because you have specialized knowledge, skill, experience, or training in some technical issue that you're here so that you can help us understand that technical issue. And she said, it is not helpful to me as the trier of fact to have you sit on the stand and you answer a bunch of questions and then you leave, and I think, dang, that guy was smart. I wish I understood what he just said. So you have to understand that's where surveyors are coming from a lot of times. So you've got to figure out, you may have an extremely competent surveyor, but you may have to figure out a way to, you know, to communicate and have dialogue with them in a way that's going to be most helpful for you. And I would point out, by the way, that you have to be really, really careful in communications with people like this, because it's extremely easy to miscommunicate when you don't have this traditional meeting of the minds, right? I kind of make a practice of when I'm sitting in a meeting and I hear and people are communicating and asking questions and answering questions, and it's not infrequent. I'll raise my hand and say, hold on a second. I heard you ask this question, and I heard you answer, but let me clarify the question that was asked, and I will, and they'll say, yeah, that's what I was asking, and I'll look at the other person and say, is that what you were answering? And they said, no, that's not the question I thought they asked. That's actually kind of scary, and things can go way wrong, and so you just have to be really cognizant of this very easy miscommunication that can happen when you're dealing with someone with a real technical mind, a technical bent, who isn't maybe the greatest at communication. So in any event, you know, if your surveyor is not a people person, it doesn't mean they don't like you. Just understanding and getting along with people is really all about self-awareness, and that's a whole nother talk that I give. But we all have to understand who we are, and hopefully the other person understands who they are. But if they don't, I have to understand who they are so that we can communicate effectively. So I'm going to summarize. Yeah, go right ahead.
I got a text, somebody asking, you got, you run the title, trying to deplot a property, it doesn't close, the attorneys have looked at it. What aspect does survey add to that to make that parcel close? Because the original legal description doesn't do that as far as the parcel.
Okay, yeah, that's a good question. So as a surveyor, what I'm going to do is probably I'm going to look at the bigger picture. You know, that deed description probably is not going to give me the answer. There will be 2 or 3 things I want to do. I want to look at the larger parcel fabric, meaning I need to look at the adjoiners. I also may want to run the chain of title back because maybe it doesn't close because somebody screwed up the description in transcribing it, 2 or 3 deeds earlier. Now, that isn't always the case. I was involved in one time where we went all the way back to the original description, and this property did not close by several hundred feet, and I kept telling the title company, well, go back further, and we finally got to the original conveyance when this parcel was originally cut out, and it did not close by, it was like 600 feet. So we're looking for the solution. I'm going to probably look at the adjoiners to see what they say, because that may help me understand what's gone wrong. And I also may want to run the chain of title all the way back to see if there was a mistake made at some point while transcribing. If neither of those points me to the answer, we may have to do specific field work to gather up the information so we can kind of solve that ambiguity. So the short answer is it might not be too hard to figure out what the problem is, or it might be a big problem. And I would say probably it leans towards the former. I think we normally, if we study things, we can probably get a clue as to what might have gone wrong, but sometimes we just can't, and it's going to take field work. So I know my time's up. I was just going to summarize, surveyors are licensed professionals. They have a very large toolbox that they can put to use on your project. Now understand the individual surveyor may or may not, but a company of any size will, right? They've got support there, and they've got other surveyors, they've got field people. The second thing, help your surveyor intimately understand your business. Right? I mean, have them spend time with you. Look at all the different things you do, the things that you're trying to accomplish, because if you do that, then your business becomes their business. Or in other words, their business should be to help you do your business as effectively and efficiently as possible. So you want to find some way, to invite them in so that they understand your business as well as you do. Then they can save you money and really do the things that are going to be most effective for you. And lastly, pay close attention to your communication. Know how they prefer to communicate. Find a way to communicate that is effective, safe, reliable, and that works for both of you. Right. With that, I'll turn it back. If there are questions, I'll be glad to take any additional questions.
Does anybody have any questions they'd like to ask Gary at this time? Okay, well, we'd like to thank you, Gary, for taking the time to speak with us, especially on short notice. We'll be emailing a list of everybody in attendance today to the group, and Gary's contact information will be there. Gary's worked in all 50 states, and he is also a consultant. So if you've got something coming up and you need a little insight to something, I'm sure he'll be happy to have you reach out to you. And if he can't help you, he can probably point you in the right direction to who to contact from region to region as well.
Yeah, and I would be happy. I get emails or voice, phone calls every single day from people around the country. I always respond fairly quickly. I want to help people. I do also have a very good friend who has her own survey company in the Pittsburgh area and highly competent. I'm not sure exactly. I know what she used to do and what she's doing now, but if you run into something, I'd be glad to give a reference. because she is highly competent and extremely conscientious. So I appreciate the opportunity and would be happy to help anybody any way that I can.
Okay, and just would like to reinforce with everybody that the IRWA, the courses they offer, a lot of the information we have discussed a little bit about today is in the 900 series of courses. 902 was property description. Would get more into surveying if you want to learn a little bit more of the history and how it's done and how it impacts right away. Course 902, property description is a 1-day course, and that would be a good course to get into to understand the perception of the side of survey and how it's developed and where that's going to play into doing land work or legal work. And I highly suggest that I took that course earlier this year, back in April. It was a virtual course due to COVID. So I did capture everybody today that was on the call, so everybody doesn't have to email me saying they were here. Next month, we have Faith Rollins from Contract Land Staff, who's going to be speaking on condemnation. Chris suggested that we get into a little bit of the condemnation and the process and relocation, and Faith is going to talk about that. She's SRWA, based out of Washington State. So as we move forward, the next couple events will be virtual until at least hopefully in March we'll be able to meet again. We'll find that out. But we appreciate everybody's time today, and everybody be safe, and we'll talk to everybody soon. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Johnny.
Thank you.